Hello and welcome to my video. This is November 2023. My name is Lauren Lau. This channel is Grand Colombia. Today's video is actually going to be a three-part video. This is part one, and it's going to be about moving, relocating specifically to Armenia, Colombia. However, most of the information will apply universally. It also will be focusing on people that are retiring. But again, if you're a digital nomad or whatever it may be, most of the information will still apply. So let's get to the heart of it. First of all, it's making the decision. Where? I struggled when I decided that I was going to move. Where am I going to go? I've been to the Philippines. I've been many places in the world, through Europe, through Asia. And so I'm replaying in my mind places I'd been, Philippines. Thailand's a beautiful country, but I don't like hot. I don't like mosquitoes. So I'm playing all these through my mind. 20 some years ago, I had a job for about a year here in Colombia, and I loved it back then. But for reasons I won't go into in this video, I've talked about in other videos, I thought it wouldn't be a good first choice. So I went to Ecuador for 3 years, but it wasn't my cup of tea. And I decided I'm going to move to Colombia. Been here over 5 years. I'm loving it. Just now receiving my permanent residency, so no more retirement visas. So what are you going to do? Making the choice of where, of course, is very important. First you want to figure out the country and playing into that, or what's the distance back to wherever you're from. It could become important, especially if you have family and friends. In my case, I have very little of that, so it didn't really come into play. Although, if I had to run back to the United States, where I'm from, it's a short hop. If I was on the other side of the world, it could be more problematic. It could take, of course, a lot more money, but it could take a lot more planning in order to get it done. How long am I going to leave? You want to consider the distance. It could be very important. It may not be. Another thing that you want to consider is the stability of the place where you're going to go. Now, people think of Colombia, they think of the 80s and 90s, and they think of all the turmoil, the political turmoil, the FARC, the rebels, the drug cartels. That's what they think of. But that was then, and this is now. It was a long time since then. Some things to keep in mind. Colombia is one of the longest running republics in the world. It's a very stable government. When all those things were occurring, the government still continued and it remained. There was no military coups. It's not like many places in South America. So that was important to me. May or may not be important to you. It's something, again, to consider. You want to consider the cost of living. If you're like me and you're living on a pension, it can be pretty important. To be perfectly honest with you, when I came to Colombia, that really wasn't the driving factor. However, once I'm living here, particularly what we've gone through in the last few years and the inflation that's sweeping the world, it turns out that I'm really fortunate that I ended up in a place that has a great cost of living. Another consideration is where you're going. Healthcare may or may not be important. Health lifestyle may or may not be important. So it depends the priorities that you set out. For most people that are retired, healthcare is certainly a strong consideration. So it doesn't hurt that in Colombia we have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Look it up. You'll see anywhere from in the 20s ranking to all the way up to number 3, depending on what criteria they're using in the world. But what you can say is it leads most of Europe. It leads certainly the United States and Canada. So it has a superior healthcare system. That could be important. Another item to consider is a level of development. Now, people throw around the terms, third world country. And if you're coming from the United States or Canada or England, something like that, and if you haven't traveled much in your life, because you step into a different culture, you might automatically think it's third world. Well, I get what you're thinking. Technically, that term goes back to World War II, and it had some very specific meanings. And most countries that you think third world actually don't fit that criteria. But set that aside. What you're thinking is it a developed country? How is the internet? Do the lights stay on? What's the infrastructure? Can I drink the water? Is there much to do? Do I have to sacrifice much? And of course, for Colombia, I will tell you that everything you could want is here. You're not sacrificing anything. I'd rather live here than California. We don't have brownouts. The level of development here in Colombia is excellent. Is it different? Yes. You'll see building constructions are very different. They don't do wood buildings. There's no wood framing. The roof designs are very different. You're going to walk in and you're going to see things very different. The culture, for a long time, having a large living space wasn't important. And so if you're used to that, like if you come from the United States, some of the older buildings or older houses can seem claustrophobic. That's changed. We've got all these high rises. I've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment that, I could fit a family of 4 in here easily. But if you see that, you might think, oh, third world. Well, no, it's just they had a different way of living. There is a fair amount of poverty. They don't hide the poverty. It's intermixed. So if you live in one area that's just got this beautiful set of high rises or gated communities, mixed among there can be houses that look rather poor. They aren't necessarily poor, but it could appear poor if you're not familiar with what's going on in the country. So level of development, I think, can be important to people, something to consider. I'm quite content here. I would certainly never call this, even if not using the technical term third world, I would never consider this third world. It's as first world as anywhere. And another item to consider making your decision is language. Now this can be a tough one because most people here don't really speak English or very little English, or are too shy to use what they learned. 20 years ago when I lived here, nobody spoke English, so it's greatly improved. However, you will need to learn Spanish, but you don't have to have it on day one. And this is why. People here are very friendly, and I'm talking about Armenia, Quindio, Colombia. People are extremely friendly, and they will help you. Plus, another thing that is your cell phone. You pick up your cell phone, you have Google Translate. You don't want to use it for a crux forever, but it'll get you through some situations. Another thing is you make local friends and you learn how to communicate with them. There's even beyond words, there's ways to communicate. You have a local friend and you hang out with them, or you invite them along when you go shopping or something of the sort. Maybe I have people that you can actually hire for a day or two or a week or whatever, and it's very inexpensive, and they can go with you for your first few times out for, let's say, the supermarket, to help you with what brands are and what's a good price and what's not. And the things that are second nature to you where you've been living, but it's a bit of an adjustment, and you're not sure. And one of the first impulses is to be skeptical of what somebody's saying. Are they trying to rip me off? Are they being honest with me? And here it's like that almost never happens in a negative way, but misunderstandings happen and you just might not know. So learning the language is certainly important, but it's not a deal breaker. I would come here again without knowing the language. But you learn, I'm 5 years down the road. I'm not fluent, but I have enough where, unless it's a very technical conversation, I can make myself understood. Okay, now you pick the country. What's the city you're going to live in? Now I say city, and you might be thinking, yeah, I like the country. I want to live in the country. No, you don't. Not to begin with. That's a bad idea. And it's a bad idea in most countries outside of the United States. Population's different, infrastructure's different, people are different. Do not do that. Live here for a year, then reconsider it. Plus, finding a place in the country takes time. We're finding a place here, I could put pretty much anybody into a new apartment within a month. So there's a lot of considerations I won't go into right now, but choosing the city is what's important. So for me, my first choice would be Armenia, Quindio, my choice for my reasons. My second place, and I think is maybe the most fantastic city in the world, is Manizales. It's about 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours from here. Absolutely fantastic city. It's got almost twice the population, but it's still small. Here in Armenia, we hover around 300,000 within the city. And in Manizales, they hover around 500,000 to 600,000, depending on who you ask. So, third choice for me, Bucaramanga. There's many places in Colombia that I've been to that I would not want to live. It's not that I couldn't live, it's just for various reasons I would not want to. We all have our list of priorities. I happen to think that this area that I'm living in is the absolute perfect place in Colombia. And I'm not the only one. Armenia Quindio is the #1 choice of Colombians once they retire to go live in. Because it's friendly, it's inexpensive, it's stunning, there's tons of things to do. Figuring out the city. We're going to assume, for conversation, you've chosen Armenia in Quindio, which is the state of Colombia. During that, you can want to consider large city, small city. You want to live in Medellin. It's over 3 million people. It's a very different place. I say it's not even Colombia because it gets tens of thousands of tourists on any given week, and it has changed the culture of that city. You could live in Bogota. Altitude's up there, so it's not everyone can live at that altitude. And it has its own characteristics, including a massive population of 10 million or more. We're going to focus on living in what feels like a small town of Armenia because the north section of it feels like a little village. Okay, you also want to consider climate. And in the Andes, you want to consider microclimates. That's a real thing here. It's not just a word. Now, if you come to Colombia and you're in Cartagena, it's going to be hot. Oh my God, it's hot because it's not only the temperature hot, but the sun being closer to the equator, the UV peel the skin off you if you're out in the afternoon without any protection. It can be pretty brutal. Humid can be an issue. I don't like hot, humid. I hate mosquitoes. So there's a lot of places that would have that. But as you go up in the Andes, the mosquitoes start fading away because they don't like to live at any kind of altitude. I'm not in a great altitude. I'm about as high as Denver. And then you get to Manizales. It's a little over 7,000 feet. No mosquitoes live there, although you'll see one once in a while with the wind blowing. But the climate can be important. It's always green here because it always rains. But there's a rhythm to the rain here in Armenia. And it primarily is in the afternoon or evening, which gives you almost always from the morning until after lunch to be out in a beautiful day. There are some exceptions to that, of course, but it has a rhythm to it. And I mentioned microclimate here in Armenia. If you live from central south, if you live in the south part of Armenia, it's considerably warmer and has little breeze. As soon as you go into the north part of Armenia, you have a constant breeze. You always have a breeze. And the temperature, therefore, is a little cooler. It's very comfortable in the north part, where in the south part of Armenia, which can just be 30, 40 blocks away, can feel like a very different place. A few years ago, if you look at my videos, you'll see that I used to walk all over Armenia, all over the south, all over the north. I've got videos of it. And many a day I'd be walking around the different barrios in the south, and it would be so freaking hot. Oh. And then I get back to the north, and I'd be doing them here, and the breeze is going, and just was comfortable. Walking is a pleasure when it's not too hot and too muggy. When it gets a little warm, walking's a pain in the butt. So one of the joys is living in a place where you don't have impediments to your walking. Kind of like if you go out in the evening, you're not going to get eaten by mosquitoes. You know, some of those things can be important. So you want to consider the climate. You also want to consider the microclimate. Now, 3 months before you leave, you want to start checking things. Check your passport. When you arrive here, you've got to have 6 months or more still left on your passport. Should be as current as you can make it. Although there is an embassy here and you can get it taken care of. I think you can even do them on the internet now, but you certainly need your passport with 6 months or more when you arrive. Documents, you want to have a list. Now, I have a visa person. If you need the information, send me an email. I'll send you a copy of her business card. But you want to get a valid list of what they're requiring in this particular moment. I don't do those in videos because those things can change. But, typically you'll need a copy of your passport. You're going to need a passport photo for the visa in their format. You're going to maybe need your health insurance for 3 months while you get settled in and get their insurance. So that you have a list of documentation that you need. For retirees, you need your benefits letter to prove that you have enough income to live here. So you want to gather those things. Make sure you have the list and you're gathering them. Keep in mind, there's expirations on certain things. For example, you don't want to get the apostille for your benefits letter. If you don't know what that is, you'll find out later. You don't want to get that apostille at the beginning of those 3 months, because by the time you arrive here and turn it in, if that's the way you're doing it, that apostille will be expired. You want to get that maybe a week or two before you leave to come here, so that you got several months that are still valid. It'll be used within a month, but you want to give yourself a little extra room. So that's very important for the preparation. Make sure your passport's right. Make sure you're gathering up all the documents you need, and be aware that some of these things are time sensitive. If you're going to be selling your property, what are you going to bring? With few exceptions, I recommend just bringing a couple suitcases and get rid of everything or put it in the storage. Maybe you got a family member, something like that. If you're insistent on bringing your whole household here, it's going to be very problematic. I won't go into now. You can always ask me during Coffee Time Live. We have a live Q&A session. It's every Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning, my time. And I'd be happy to go into it then. Not in this video. Next thing on my list, mail. Once you're here for a little while, you'll have no need for mail. I don't get mail anymore. It's been far too long. I've been down here over 8 years, and so that ship sailed a long time ago. But it actually was over after about a year. When I came down, I had a mail service, but that mail service was $20 a month. And when you're living on retirement money, that's real money, And if you're not really using that service, you're just burning it. So I had it for a while, but then there was really no point. You can get a friend, or better, a family member to send your mail to, and all they have to do is throw away the junk mail, put this stuff in a box, and then maybe once a month you give them a call and they can check out, hold it up and say, does this sound important? No, throw it away. They don't even have to open it until you finally get to something that might be important. Then they can take a picture or scan it and send it on to you. It'll save you money. You may be used to be getting a lot of mail, but you're going to find that very soon that becomes a non-issue. Plus, most things you can do online in digital format. So you can set those things up even before you leave. All right, what's next? Packing. As I mentioned, I packed 2 suitcases. What I did was I went online and I bought the best suitcases I could find within my price range. Now, this was 9 years ago, and they were Samsonite, and they were $300 a piece. I am so glad I got them. They're the maximum size that the airport will accept. It has an expansion feature, and I used that. I really packed them. Now, I went over, you want to be careful. I was flying American at that time, and they had a limit of 50 pounds per suitcase. And if you went over, there were increments. It could be $100, $150, $200 for every whatever the range of the pound over it was. Both my suitcases end up being over, so it cost me a couple $100 extra. What do you bring in 2 suitcases? You got a whole life, or at least I did. I collected books. I read books, collected books. I had my own library. I can't bring them. I had to keep going through over and over and over and over again to whittle down the kind of books that I wanted to bring. And I ended up bringing only 9 books. Books are heavy too, so beware of that. I cook, so I brought my knife, my set of knives, the chef knives. I brought them. I brought a few pairs of shoes. I brought some denim blue jeans, 1 set of dress slacks, 20-some black t-shirts. Can't go wrong. A jacket, and some personal items. It's hard to whittle down, and it took me about 3 months. I kept going back and pulling them out and changing, but it's an important thing. Don't worry. You hear all the time people say, you can't get shoes my size. I'm a size 13, size 15. I can't get shoes. It's not true. You may not be able to walk into a store and get them off the shelf, but this is a country full of craftsmen, and you can get a handmade pair of shoes to your design. You can bring them a picture, and they will make them by hand, and they likely will turn out to be the best shoes you've ever had. And the cost is amazing because labor here is very, very inexpensive. The materials might, run the cost up, but you're going to get a handmade pair of shoes for peanuts compared to what you would get that somewhere else. And you'll get them fitted to your person. So don't worry about those things. Everything is available here. Okay, so you packed, you're ready to go. Another thing that comes up is the itinerary. You'll hear that you're required to have a return flight when you first come. It's sort of true, but not really. You may be asked to show proof that you will be exiting the country. You're coming in, you're going to be exiting because you're not coming in established here. And so that's going to be an important thing. They often don't ask that, but they may be asking you that. And that's usually the airline asking, because if they bring somebody and they get rejected at immigration, the airline has to provide the seat to take you back, and it's a money loser. So what do? How do you get around that? Well, first of all, if you go online for whatever service airline tickets you might buy online, Expedia, for example, you can print an itinerary without paying for it. So you can show your flight on the itinerary and a return flight, but you haven't paid for it. That is usual. I've never heard it rejected, as a matter of fact. I know a lot of people that have used that as their proof of outgoing, even though they don't have a ticket. Another thing, if you're worried about that, you can go online and you can buy a bus ticket to Ecuador, for example. It'll cost you $20. The buses are very cheap. So if you're concerned about that, do that. But at the very least, print off that itinerary. And if you're at the airport, they want to reject you, just go sit down, get on your phone, buy yourself the bus ticket, walk back, and show them, look, I bought the bus ticket. You're good to go. And last thing I'll talk about in this video, and we'll get to some really good stuff, particularly once you get here, but this is all in preparation. It's your 90-day visa. Now, I'm going to speak to those primarily that are coming from the United States. Some of this may vary a little bit depending on where you're from. But if you have a U.S. passport coming into Colombia, you are automatically accepted and allowed 90 days free of charge to be here in Colombia. Now, this is the perfect time to get your visa. You arrive here, you take a few days to get checked in and unwind, and then before the week's out, you hit the ground running. You go to the visa agent. You can hire me, and I'll help you those first 3 days to get your life pointed in the right direction and not make mistakes. But you get to the visa agent with all the documents that you know are good because you verified that before you ever left. And you turn those documents in. She processes that, and in a few weeks, your visa is approved, and then she will set up an appointment with you to get your cedula. What's a cedula? That's your national ID card. Little side note, the United States, somebody asks for your ID, you can say no. Most countries, if a policeman comes up and asks for your ID, you're required by law to carry it and to show him. It's not ominous like you might feel like in the United States. There's actually here, there's good reasons for it. It's happened to me once. I was in a bus terminal. I won't go through the story, but there was a question about what I was doing, and the police came over, and I showed them the ID, and everything was cool. You'll get your cedula, and that usually, with few exceptions, will take place within 30 days. And then you've still got 2 more months on the free one. Now, when you're getting your visa, that will give you, if it's a retirement visa, since COVID, it could give you 1 year, could give you 2 years, can go up to 3 years. It used to be automatically just 3 years. But with the healthcare situation after COVID, depending on what you have, you probably get 1 year for the first one, and then 2 or 3 years for your next one. Once you hit 5 years, you can continue with those every 3 years, or you can do what I did, get your permanent residency. All right, that's it for this one. Stay tuned for part 2. I promise you it'll get more interesting, and see you then. Hello, my name is Lauren Lau, and I want to thank you for watching my videos. It's my goal by sharing my life experience that you can make a good decision if you're relocating, because you need true and honest information. And that's what I try to give you. The videos are free. Of course, contributions are always welcome. Costs money to do this. But due to requests a few years ago, I began helping people relocate beyond what the videos are. If you check out my webpage, grandcolumbia.live, you'll see here at the top, it says relocations. If you click on that, you'll see various things that I can do. I do Skype calls, one-on-one. We've set up an appointment. It says an hour. Sometimes they go 2 hours. Doesn't cost any different. But I also can meet you at the airport, spend the following 3 days giving you an orientation, showing you around the area, and getting you settled in. Of course, I'll give you a list of contacts that will be for movers, real estate people, doctors, things, house cleaners. There will also be names of locals that can meet up with you, give you tours. If you want to go to Salento and have somebody go with you, show you around, see how to operate the taxis and buses, or best place to go shopping, or whatever that is, I can set you up with locals that can help you with that. And they can also help you find apartments. My goal for you is have you up and running within a month. That's getting your cedula, that's getting your apartment moved in, knowing your way around, having contacts, so that you're ready to go. The key is so that you can make good decisions without losing money by making a mistake. Back to the video.